$30 million cleared into his account at 9:12 a.m. By 9:47, a clause he'd never read turned that windfall into a trap. He called me dead weight, but the deed called me grantor, trustee, and life tenant. Guess which one the judge listened to when my son tried to sell my house from under me. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and at 62 years old, I am a new widow. The air in the lakeside chapel was frigid, smelling of damp wool coats and the industrial wax on the pews. It was the morning of my husband Victor's memorial, and I sat in the front row, a fixed point of stillness in Mariners Bay, Michigan. Beside me, my son, Grayson, performed his grief flawlessly. At 38, he was handsome in his bespoke black suit, his sorrow looking as curated as everything else in his life. He held the hand of his wife, Sloane Archer, who dabbed at her dry, perfect influencer eyes with a silk handkerchief. They were a portrait of mourning, and it was a lie from frame to canvas. I watched them, but I was listening to the man whispering behind them. Kellen Archer, Sloane's brother, a realtor whose smile never reached his eyes. He was not whispering condolences. I caught the words timelines and liquidity, and then, sharp as a paper cut, off-market potential. He was assessing my home, the lake house, while my husband's ashes were still in an urn 10 feet away. People moved past me in a line of sympathetic murmurs. When Victor's longtime estate attorney, Harper Lane, reached me, she didn't offer platitudes. Harper, of Lane and Meyer, was a woman of precise angles and zero sentiment. She wrapped her arms around me in a hug that was pure structure, no comfort. Her voice was neutral, but her grip on my arm was a warning. "Eleanor," she said. Just that, before moving on. My family had never paid much attention to my career. For 30 years. I'd worked at the North Shore Compliance Institute, a quiet place for a quiet job. I audited non-profit fraud. I spent my days following invisible money, finding the rot hidden beneath immaculate ledgers. Victor thought it was boring. Grayson thought it was beneath him. Sloane, I am certain, did not know it existed. Nobody in the family ever cared about my ability to read the fine print. They were about to... Later, at the wake. The house was filled with people eating miniature quiches. Grayson found me by the fireplace. He didn't ask how I was. He slid a glossy brochure onto the mantel beside my hand. Harbour Pines Residence. The cover showed silver-haired people laughing over a game of bridge. "It's not a nursing home, Mum," he said, his voice low and practiced, the same one he used on investors. "It's vibrant. It's what you deserve." I looked at the brochure, then at him. The coldness from the chapel had followed me home. I registered the phrasing, the casual ownership in his tone. "We'll move you Thursday," he continued, not asking, telling. "We need the house staged Friday." Sloane drifted over, placing a cold hand on my shoulder. "We just worry," she said, her voice a sweet poison. "All these stairs. They're just so dangerous at your age." I felt the air leave my lungs. Thursday, 4 days after burying my husband. I looked across the crowded room and saw Harper Lane standing by the door, watching us, as if she'd felt my gaze. She pulled out her phone. A moment later, my own phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't look at it immediately. I just smiled at Sloane. A thin, brittle thing. "How thoughtful of you both," I said, when they moved on. Kellen already whispering in Grayson's ear again. I pulled the phone from my pocket. A single text from Harper. Do not sign anything tonight. I pressed the screen dark and slid the phone back into the pocket of my black dress. It felt heavy, like a stone, or perhaps like a match. Tuesday began not with grief, but with the digital hum of transactions I was never meant to see. At 8:02 in the morning, while I was rinsing my first coffee cup, Grayson was finalizing the bulk sale of Victor's regional storage facilities, $30 million. The wire was initiated, sent arrowing toward his private holding company, an entity I had never heard of. At 8:20, the next move was made. Kellen Archer, smelling blood in the water, was already pushing a cash buyer for the lake house. I didn't know the specifics then, only the suffocating pressure I had felt at the wake. He wanted a 72-hour closing. To capture momentum, he'd urged Grayson. My momentum. My home. At 8:41, my landline rang, its shrill sound violent in the quiet house. A cheerful coordinator from Harbour Pines residence, calling to confirm the details for my transition suite on Thursday. Sloane Archer booked it for you, the woman said, her voice dripping with professional courtesy. Isn't she thoughtful? We just need to confirm your dietary restrictions. I told her I had none and hung up. The reservation had been made, of course, without my consent. They were efficient. I had to give them that. A perfectly executed plan. Grayson handled the major assets. Kellen handled the real estate. Sloane handled me. The inconvenient baggage to be checked into a holding facility. But at 9:05, my doorbell chimed. It wasn't Sloane, arriving early to see if I'd started packing my memories into boxes. It was a legal courier, dispatched by Harper's paralegal. He held out a clipboard for my signature and then handed me a thick, sealed binder, heavy as a brick. The label was embossed in plain, severe lettering. Blue Heron Trust Private. I carried it into the kitchen. At 9:12, as I was searching the junk drawer for a letter opener, Grayson's phone lit up miles away. The $30 million had landed. The transfer was complete. I can picture him. The sharp intake of breath. The triumphant smile. The screenshot sent immediately to Sloane. The caption, "We're free." Free of his father's legacy. Free of his mother. At 9:23, my own laptop pinged. An automated email from a local title company requesting the standard seller disclosures for the lake house. Kellen had forwarded the chain to Grayson with a brisk note, and he had carbon copied me. My name was listed at the bottom of the email, a footnote in my own life. Eleanor Whitfield, occupant. Occupant. The word hung in the air. A guest. A squatter. Not the woman who had chosen the paint colours in the study. Not the woman who had planted the hydrangeas that lined the drive. At 9:47, in her quiet office across town. Harper Lane received an automated alert she had set on my parcel years ago. The county recorder posted a new flag. A transfer package had been prepped. The hunt had officially begun. The house was silent, except for the ticking clock above the stove. I sat down at the kitchen table. It was 10:10 in the morning. I finally opened the binder. The paper was heavy, expensive. My fingers, trained by 3 decades of compliance work, flipped past the introductions and the asset summaries. I looked for the covenants, the restrictions, the fine print everyone ignores. I found it at section 14. My breath caught in my throat. It was an enhanced life estate deed, a lady bird deed, as we call them in Michigan. It's an instrument usually designed for Medicaid planning, but Harper had clearly weaponized it. I read the granting clause, my eyes scanning the dense legal text until they landed on the key line. Grantor Eleanor K. Whitfield, trustee of the Blue Heron Trust. My hands began to shake. It wasn't the cold fear from the chapel. It wasn't the quiet rage from Sloane's phone call. It was relief. A sudden, sharp, agonizing relief that Victor had kept at least one promise he made the night he begged forgiveness. Victor hadn't died suddenly. Not really. He had died a week after his confession. But the true end began 2 months before his heart gave out. On a Tuesday night in late winter. He came home late, long after the sun had set over the frozen lake. The house was dark, except for the small lamp I kept on in the study. He didn't turn on the overhead lights. He just stood in the doorway, his silhouette stark against the hall. He was pale, a greyish tint under his skin that the dim light couldn't hide, and he was clutching a thick manila envelope as if it were his own failing heart. He sat in his leather chair, but didn't lean back. He placed the envelope on the desk between us. I fixed it. "Eleanor," he whispered, but his voice was hollow. I fixed what Grayson broke. Grayson was always breaking things. Business ventures, partnerships, promises. This time, it was a major development project, mismanaged into the ground. But Victor hadn't just used his own money to patch the hole. He admitted it slowly. The words pulled from him. He had been siphoning vendor rebates, small amounts at first, then larger, diverting money that belonged to his partners, hiding the deficit from the bank. It was fraud, the exact kind of quiet, desperate white-collar crime I had built my career on identifying. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was compliance. "We need an audit, Victor. A full, independent audit, right now." "I already did," he said, his gaze dropping to the envelope. "I went to Harper. She brought in her own people." He finally leaned back, the leather groaning in protest. "She structured a corrective plan, a way to make the partners whole without triggering a default. But only if I cleaned house. Cleaning house meant walling off Grayson, our son's impulsiveness, his greed, his belief that consequence was for other people. Victor had finally seen it as the liability it was. "Harper wanted to protect you," Victor continued, his hand resting on the envelope. "If I died, if this all fell apart, she said Grayson would liquidate everything, including this house, and leave you with nothing." That was when he explained the Blue Heron Trust. To protect me. Harper had done something drastic. She had retitled the lake house, moving it out of Victor's name and into the trust. And she had affixed an enhanced life estate, a ladybird deed with my name, Eleanor K. Whitfield, as the life tenant and trustee. I hadn't understood the true power of it until I read the binder this morning. Now, sitting at my kitchen table, I read the clauses again, the words clear as glass. Clause 14A. Any attempt to sell, encumber, or relocate me without my express written consent would trigger an automatic reversion, not just of the house, but of all marital residuary assets, pulling them back into the protective shell of the trust. Clause 14B. If I was involuntarily displaced, say, by a son booking me into a vibrant, assisted living facility, an escalation rider would activate. A rider that clawed back the proceeds from any affiliated sale made within 180 days. Affiliated sales? Like the $30 million storage facility deal that had closed at 9:12 this morning. "It's penance, Eleanor." Victor had sworn that night in the study, his eyes pleading, He was ashamed, truly, deeply ashamed, not just of the crime, but of the son he had enabled for 4 decades. I looked at this broken man, my husband, and I agreed. I would sign the papers. I would become the trustee. I would hold this power, on one condition. Grayson never learns, I told him. He can never know this exists. Let him think he's still the heir. The shame of this will be yours and mine. Victor agreed. A week later, his heart stopped at a red light. The stroke was massive. The manila envelope, the one containing Harper's audit and the corrective plan, went into the back of his desk drawer. Until now. I looked down at the binder on my table. This wasn't just a deed. It wasn't just a record of ownership. It was a lever, crafted in secret by a repentant husband and a shark of an attorney. And this morning, my son, flush with his 30 million, had put his full weight on the other end and tried to move the fulcrum. They didn't wait until Thursday. They arrived the next morning, Wednesday, in a fleet of white vans, stagers. They flooded the lake house, carrying grey furniture and beige art, their voices sharp and dismissive as they inventoried my life. Sloane was at their centre, the stage manager of my eviction. She pointed at the wall of family photos above the fireplace, Grayson's childhood, our summers on the water, Victor's proud face holding a fish. "All of this has to go," she announced to a woman with a clipboard. "We need it market neutral. Buyers can't project themselves here with all this history." She began pulling them down herself, handling the silver frames with distaste, stacking my memories on the floor like firewood. My life, my marriage, being stripped from the walls, reduced to clutter. Kellen Archer cornered me by the kitchen, all teeth and impatience. "Eleanor, great news," he said, not meaning it. "We're going to need the early access keys for the lockbox. The photographer is coming tomorrow, and we need the stagers to have full run of the place." I gave him the thinnest smile I could muster. "Oh, that might be a problem. Kellen, I'm having the locks changed this afternoon. At 5 p.m. Security? You understand?" His smile faltered, a hairline crack in the facade. Changing why? "It's a big house," I said smoothly. "And I'm a widow now. I have to be careful." He didn't know what to do with that. Before he could formulate a response, Grayson strode in, his phone held up like a trophy. "Offers in," he announced to the room, to Sloane, to Kellen, and incidentally to me. 6.2 million, all cash. They want to close by Friday." Sloane clapped her hands, a sharp, bird-like sound. "Grayson, darling, that's incredible, Kellen. You're a miracle worker." I waited for the applause to die down. The stagers paused, listening. "That is a wonderful number." "Grayson," I said, my voice cutting through the artificial excitement. "I just have one simple question. Who signed the listing agreement?" Grayson looked confused. He glanced at Kellen, then at Sloane. Sloane stepped forward, patting my arm in that condescending way she had. "Eleanor, don't you worry about the boring paperwork. Grayson handled it. He has the power of successor, obviously." Power of successor. The term was meaningless, a jumble of legal words she'd heard on a television show. She might as well have said he had the magic wand of inheritance. "Is that so?" I said. I took my phone from my pocket. "Harper, are you there?" I had called her before they arrived, asking her to stand by. I pressed the speakerphone button. Harper Lane's voice filled the room, crisp, cold, and utterly unambiguous. I'm here? Eleanor? Good morning? Everyone? Harper, I said. My son and his wife seem to believe they've sold my house. They just mentioned a power of successor. Could you clarify something for the room? Who, exactly, is legally authorized to sell a trust asset that is currently occupied by a life tenant? The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound that when one of the stagers, frozen in the hallway, fumbled a cardboard box, the crash of shattering neutral vases sounded like a gunshot. Sloane's face was white. Grayson's was turning a deep, mottled red. Kellen Archer stepped forward, attempting to recover. He laughed, a short, barking sound. Oh, come on. This is just a title issue. A little family confusion. We'll bulldoze this with a quitclaim deed. It's a simple fix. Harper's voice came back, laced with something I had never heard from her before. Amusement. Bulldoze a ladybird deed in Michigan with a quitclaim from a non-grantor, Mr. Archer. I'll bring popcorn. Please, proceed. Grayson finally erupted. What is this? Mum, what are you doing? She's confused. Grayson! Sloane snapped, her mask slipping. The sweet influencer replaced by the sharp-toothed woman I always knew was underneath. She's grieving. She doesn't understand what's happening. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I picked up the Blue Heron Trust binder from the kitchen counter. I opened it to section 14. My hands were steady. My voice did not tremble. And I read, word for word, mispronouncing nothing. The clause that explained exactly what happened to all marital residuary assets when a beneficiary attempted to involuntarily displace the life tenant. The stagers left. The house was suddenly deeply quiet, save for the hum of my laptop. The chaos had receded, leaving Grayson, Sloane, and Kellen standing in my foyer, their faces a mask of disbelief and fury. They left without another word. The offensive, however, had merely shifted from the physical to the digital. The next morning, an email arrived from the title office, polite and procedural. They were requesting my formal consent as the occupant to the pending sale, just a simple form to sign. I did not sign their form. Instead, I drafted my own response. I attached a notarized occupancy affidavit, stating I was not a tenant, but the life tenant and trustee. I also attached a memorandum of the enhanced life estate, a document I had prepared with Harper, and I CC'd the county recorder's office, requesting its immediate recording. My 30 years in compliance had taught me that the person who controls the paperwork controls the outcome. Simultaneously, Harper launched her own salvo. She filed a formal notice of protective interest against the parcel, a bright red flag for any title insurer, and she forwarded this notice directly to the buyer's legal counsel. It was a professional courtesy that acted like a hand grenade. The response from the buyer's counsel came within an hour. I was copied on the email. The tone was no longer brisk. It was confused and rapidly becoming hostile. We were advised, their attorney wrote, that this was a simple fee, simple transfer from the estate of Victor Whitfield. Please explain this trust overlay and the attached notice immediately. Our client's funds are in escrow based on representations that now appear to be inaccurate. Harper's reply was a masterwork of polite destruction. She attached the complete, recorded deed chain, a perfect, unbroken line of title. First, the original warranty deed, showing Victor and me as owners. Second, the subsequent quitclaim deed, signed by us both. assigning the property to the Blue Heron Trust years ago. And third, the enhanced life estate deed, recorded at the same time, reserving my rights as grantor, trustee, and life tenant, indelible as stone. The reaction was immediate. Escrow froze. The $6.2 million was locked down, inaccessible to the buyer, and certainly inaccessible to Grayson. Kellen, I was told, was apoplectic, shouting into his phone in the driveway that he could get another title company by noon, that this was just a vindictive old woman's power trip. But no title company in Michigan would insure a sale with a recorded ladybird deed and an active notice of protective interest. The house was toxic. While he was screaming, I was typing. I went to the Mariners Bay County website and quietly registered the lake house property with the county fraud alert system, linking any activity on the parcel directly to my trustee email. It was a simple, free service. Another tripwire. Sloane, seeing the legal and financial avenues closing, turned to the only weapon she had: public opinion. She crafted a long, sympathetic post on her social media, complete with a beautifully filtered photo of her and Grayson, looking concerned. She wrote about the difficult transition of elder care, about the hard choice they had to make to move Mom closer to friends and a more vibrant community, ensuring her safety now that she was alone. It backfired spectacularly. The comments section filled not with sympathy, but with confusion from the people of Mariners Bay. Closer to friends, wrote the head of the Lakeside Library. Eleanor has been volunteering here 3 days a week for 20 years. We are her friends. Another wrote, That's strange. I just saw Eleanor driving her own car to the market yesterday. She looked anything but frail. Sloane, in her curated digital world, had forgotten I had a real one. Grayson was the last to break. He stormed into the house that evening, his face blotched and his hands shaking. He wasn't performing grief now. This was pure rage. You can't do this, he shouted, his voice echoing in the hall Sloane had tried to strip bare. Dad promised me this house. He promised me. I walked to the study, Victor's study. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out the manila envelope he had clutched that night, the one containing the audit and his confession. Tucked inside was a single sheet of his personal letterhead, a handwritten addendum to our agreement, his final penance. I held it out to Grayson. He snatched it. He read the looping, familiar script. A promise isn't a deed. The house is Eleanor's. She will know what is right. Grayson's addendum wasn't the only thing in that manila envelope. Victor, in his shame, had included the full audit and reconciliation Harper's team had prepared. He had wanted me to have all the facts, even the ones he couldn't bring himself to speak. That night, with the house finally mine, I sat in the study and did what I had done for 30 years. I followed the money. The reconciliation was messy, full of Victor's panicked attempts to patch the holes Grayson had made. But one line item, repeated 3 times, caught my eye. It was a contractor escrow account, flagged only with the abbreviation BH-SUP, Blue Heron Supplement. It felt like a loose thread, and I knew if I pulled it, something would unravel. I didn't pull it alone. The next morning, I called Harper and asked about the flag. She was silent for a moment, then told me she would bring in her partner, Mirelle Soto. Mirelle was the Meyer in Lane and Meyer, the firm's forensic accountant, a woman who lived in spreadsheets and saw stories in wire transfers. I met them at their office. a quiet, expensive suite of glass and grey stone. Mirelle didn't waste time with pleasantries. I showed her the reconciliation. She focused on BH Sup instantly. "That's not one of our standard flags," she said, her fingers already flying across a keyboard, pulling data from systems I couldn't access. Victor must have created it. We spent an hour tracing it. It was a ghost, a pass-through account designed to look boring. But Mirelle was relentless. Finally, she found the link. The routing numbers for BH Sup didn't lead to a contractor or a vendor. They led directly to a Shell LLC, a company registered in Delaware with a post office box for an address. The name of the LLC was North Channel Partners. My blood ran cold. North Channel was the name of the tiny, unsuccessful charter boat company Grayson had tried to start, and failed. Right after college. It was his signature. "He's been using it as a private bank," Mirelle said, her voice flat. She brought up the wire history. The numbers were sickeningly clear. A total of $1.8 million had cycled through North Channel Partners during the exact time frame of Grayson's failing project. It was the money Victor confessed to siphoning. He hadn't just been patching Grayson's business. He had been funneling the stolen money directly to him, and Grayson had been taking it. My son wasn't just impulsive. He was complicit. Mirelle kept digging, her expression hardening. "This is recent," she said, pointing to the screen. "Look at this." There was a new outbound wire. It was dated Tuesday morning, the morning of the storage facility sale, the morning the $30 million landed. My son, feeling rich and untouchable, had made another move. He had wired $750,000 from the North Channel account to a high-risk crypto exchange. He was laundering his father's stolen money, trying to wash it clean with his new, legitimate windfall. Harper, who had been watching over Mirelle's shoulder, walked to the window. She looked down at the street for a long moment before turning back to me. "Clause 14B, she said, her voice quiet but electric. "The escalation rider. It cross-references affiliated sale consideration with prior concealed transfers." I understood. "The $1.8 million, I whispered. "Exactly," Harper said. "Grayson's attempt to displace you triggers the clawback. But Mirelle just proved that he was also party to the original concealed transfers that the trust was designed to correct. This means the clawback isn't just limited to the house. It extends to any post-death disposition within the 180-day window." She let the words hang in the air. The $30 million. The entire sale of the storage facilities. It was all tied together. The trap wasn't just for the house. It was for everything. Mirelle began drafting a concise, brutal memo, attaching the wire histories and the LLC registration. Harper watched her work, and for the first time since I'd known her, a slow, wolfish smile spread across her face. My heart ached. It was a physical, crushing weight. This was my son, my only child. This was not a game. "Harper," I asked, my voice barely audible, "if we use this, can we do this without completely ruining him?" Harper looked at me, her smile gone, replaced by the cool, hard logic I relied on. "Eleanor," she said, "he is already doing that. He's committing wire fraud using his dead father's stolen funds. We aren't ruining him. We are just making it lawful." Sloane, it turned out, was incapable of accepting defeat. She believed that if she simply acted as if she had won, the world would bend to her will. On Thursday morning, the day I was supposed to have been transitioned, A large, moving truck rumbled down my driveway. She had rescheduled the movers. I was waiting for them. I had spent the morning packing. I labelled 2 large decoy boxes with a thick black marker winter coats, another one linens. They were filled with old towels and duplicate blankets from the guest room. Things I wouldn't miss. The real items, the things that held the texture of my life, were already gone. I had moved them myself at dawn. The cracked leather photo albums, Victor's old fishing journal with his terrible handwriting, my mother's gold locket, and the handful of silver frames Sloane had discarded on the floor. They were not at Harbour Pines. They were in a climate-controlled unit at Rose Harbour Storage, a facility on the other side of town, registered and paid for under the name of the Blue Heron Trust. Grayson arrived just behind the movers, acting as the man in charge. He stormed up the walkway and thrust a piece of paper at me. It was a single printed sheet. At the top, in a bold, amateur font, it read, "Notice to vacate. You have 24 hours. Mom," he said, his voice tight, "this is a legal eviction." I took the paper. It was absurd. It cited no statute. It was just a typed paragraph of angry demands. At the bottom, there was a notary stamp. I recognized the name. It was Kellen's girlfriend, a paralegal at a different real estate office. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. "I'll have Harper review this," I said. When I called Harper and read the text to her, she was silent for a beat, and then she laughed. A short, sharp, genuine laugh. "A love letter notarized by a girlfriend," she said. "Adorable. Ignore it. Eleanor. It's wallpaper." Grayson was directing the movers toward the porch when another car pulled in, a county sheriff's cruiser. My heart didn't leap. I had been expecting this. Sloane's next move. A deputy, a young man who looked apologetic, knocked on the open door. "Ma'am, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. We received a call, a request for a wellness check. Someone reported you were not acting like yourself, possibly in a state of distress." "Oh, goodness," I said, stepping back. "Please, come in." "Deputy, I was just about to make some tea. Would you like some?" He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the labelled boxes. Then he saw me, calm, dressed, and clearly not in distress. "Ma'all, are you being forced to leave your home?" "No, deputy," I said, walking to the study. I pointed to the wall where I had hung a framed copy of the newly recorded deed. "This is my home. I have a recorded enhanced life estate. My son," I said, gesturing to Grayson, who was frozen on the porch, "is confused about the terms of his father's will. His wife is the one who is distressed." The deputy read the document. He was polite. He was embarrassed. He tipped his hat, declined the tea, and walked back to his cruiser. I watched him say a few short words to Grayson before driving away. The movers, seeing a sheriff leave without incident, looked at Grayson for direction. They were on the clock, and this was getting complicated. Before Grayson could speak, a third car arrived. This one was a sedan, and a man with a clipboard got out. "Eleanor Whitfield?" he asked, walking up. "I'm Dave. From North Shore Inspection Services. I'm here for the buyer's inspection." "Of course," I said, smiling warmly. "Please, come in. I want you to be thorough." He was surprised by my cooperation. He started in the kitchen. As he opened the cabinet under the sink, I handed him a single, folded sheet of paper. "Just for your records," I said. "This is a copy of the trust rider. The one my attorney filed. It outlines the life tenancy and the clawback provisions tied to the parcel. He stopped what he was doing and read it. He read it twice. He looked at me, then at the rider, then at the empty foyer where the stage's furniture should have been. "I need to make a call," he said. He walked out to the driveway. I watched him through the window. He was not just making a call. He was having an argument. After 10 minutes, he got in his car and drove away, leaving the movers and my son standing in the driveway. An hour later, the final email arrived, this time from the title company's chief underwriter. It was a curative demand, a formal notice to the seller's agent Kellen. The sale was dead. Seller must obtain full, written, and irrevocable consent from the life tenant, Eleanor K. Whitfield, or this file will be cancelled and all escrow funds returned to the buyer within 48 hours. The movers, sensing a paycheck disappearing, began loading their dollies back onto the truck. Grayson stayed until twilight. He just stood on the lawn, watching the house as if it had betrayed him. The lights were coming on inside. My lights. In my house. He finally walked to the porch. His shoulders slumped. He looked old. "You're punishing me," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "This is just to punish me." I looked at my son, the man-child who had broken his father's heart and tried to steal his mother's home. "No, Grayson," I said. The air was cold, but my voice was colder. "I'm teaching you consequence." I closed the door, leaving him in the dark. The only sound was the rhythmic slap of the waves against the dock, like a metronome, ticking away. They were quiet for almost a full day. The silence was unnerving, a strategic retreat I didn't trust. I was in the living room on Friday afternoon, reading a book, when the large television screen over the fireplace suddenly went black. A moment later, a grey box appeared. An airdrop request from Sloane's iPhone. Before I could react, the request vanished and the screen was populated with a document. She hadn't meant to send it to the television. She had undoubtedly meant to send it to Grayson or Kellen, who must have been in the car with her, approaching the house. She had, accidentally, broadcast her entire plan to the living room television. My body went cold. It was a term sheet, the logo Bridgewell Equity emblazoned at the top. It was an offer, not for the house, but for my son. They were offering Grayson a C-suite position, Vice President of Lifestyle Acquisitions. The offer was contingent on his contribution of certain legacy assets to their new fund. I didn't need to guess. Halfway down the page, a clause listed the initial assets for the portfolio. At the top of the list, Mariners Bay Lakehouse pipeline flip. Beside it, in a notes column, projected influencer content to be developed by Sloane Archer upon successful transition of occupant. A pipeline flip. Influencer content. My home. Then, as if she were fumbling with her phone in the car, the document vanished and was replaced by another. This one was titled Draft Care Covenant. It was an attachment to the term sheet, a legal promise. It outlined, in disturbingly cheerful language, Bridgewell's commitment to providing continued support for Eleanor Whitfield's transition to a managed care environment. At the bottom of the page was a digital signature line. Grayson's name was already on it, signed and dated yesterday. While he was standing on my lawn calling me a punisher, he had already signed a contract with a private equity firm, trading me for a title. I didn't move. I raised my phone, my hands perfectly steady, and I took clear, high-resolution photographs of every line on the screen. I captured the Bridgewell logo, the C-suite offer, the pipeline flip, and most importantly, the care covenant with Grayson's signature. I emailed the photographs to Harper. Her call came 30 seconds later. "They are fools," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Absolute, unadulterated fools. That covenant, Eleanor. That is the attempt to relocate you. It's not just a plan, it's a signed agreement. They breached Clause 14A in spirit and in letter. They just handed us the entire case." It was time to end this. I told Harper what I needed. An hour later, my kitchen table summit convened. It was a small, focused group. Harper, with her legal mind. Mirelle Soto, with her forensic trail of the money. And, at my request, Sheriff Tully. Jim Tully was an old, decent friend from the Literacy Council, a man who understood the town and, more importantly, understood the law as it was practiced, not just as it was written. I poured coffee. Jim took the first sip. "Eleanor," he said, his voice kind but firm. "I've checked the docket. There has been no lawful eviction attempt filed against you. No petition, no court order. What you got from your son was a PR stunt. That wellness check was a harassment tactic. As of this moment, you are in your home, and no one can legally remove you from it." Mirelle, who had been silent, leaned forward. "They know that now. The buyer is gone. Kellen's bluff failed. This new document proves they are desperate. They are moving on to a new buyer, Bridgewell, and they still have the same problem you. They still think they can bully you into signing a consent." She looked at Harper, then at me. "So let's give them a meeting. Let's bait the misrepresentation. Let's get them in a room and ask them to state their case on the record." Harper nodded, catching the strategy instantly. "We get Grayson to state, for the record, that he is the fee's simple owner. We get Kellen to repeat his nonsense about a quitclaim. We get them to present that care covenant as a done deal." I stood up. "We will, but not in the kitchen." I led them into Victor's study, the room where he had confessed, the room where the truth, however painful, lived in the walls. "We'll host it here," I said. "Mirelle, you and Harper will be present, but silent as counsel for the trust." I walked behind the heavy oak desk, my desk. I opened the top drawer and took out Victor's old monogrammed fountain pen, the heavy, silver one he used to sign every important document of his life. I placed it in the very center of the leather desk blotter. It was not a relic. It was a weapon, waiting for a signature. The trap was set. We convened in the study at 2 p.m. the following day. I had agreed to the meeting on the pretense of negotiating my transition. I sat behind Victor's heavy oak desk. The monogrammed silver pen lay precisely in the center of the blotter. Harper and Mirelle sat in the 2 leather chairs against the wall, silent, present as legal counsel for the Blue Heron Trust. Grayson, Sloane, and Kellen took the seats opposite me. They looked triumphant, as if they were arriving for a surrender, not a negotiation. They had brought their new prize with them. On the large monitor mounted to the wall, a man in a severe suit stared back at us. A small caption identified him, David Chen Counsel, Bridgewell Equity. Kellen, ever the master of ceremonies, started the proceedings. He flashed a brilliant, false smile. "Eleanor, thank you for agreeing to this. We are all here to finalize the terms of your consent, Bridgewell." He gestured to the screen. Is prepared to cover all associated moving expenses, provided we can expedite the sale. I leaned forward. Wording is so important. Kellen, what exact wording are you using for these moving expenses? Sloane, impatient, sighed. Eleanor, it's just standard adult placement language. It's the covenant we discussed, the one that ensures you're taken care of. I saw Morel, in the periphery of my vision, discreetly tap the tablet in her lap. The recording was active. Before we discuss my placement, I said, my voice cutting through their confidence, I believe we need to clarify the asset for Mr. Chen Grayson. Perhaps you could state your legal standing regarding the property. My son, seeing his C-suite title dangling before him, puffed up his chest. He looked directly at the monitor, a CEO in training. It's very straightforward, David, he said, the casual use of the name sickening me. I am the fee simple owner of this property. It was willed to me through my father's estate. My mother is currently a guest here, an occupant. The asset is unencumbered and mine to contribute. The Bridgewell lawyer nodded slowly, listening. Harper, without a word, stood. She walked to the desk and slid the laminated recorded deed chain across the wood. The 3 documents: the warranty deed, the assignment to the trust, the enhanced life estate. Kellen waved a hand dismissively. We've dealt with this. It's a minor title cloud, a technicality. This is a family matter. The lawyer on the screen, however, leaned closer to his camera. His gaze was sharp. He was reading the titles upside down. I met my son's eyes. Show me, Grayson, I said, my voice perfectly level. Show Mr. Chen where my life estate ends. Grayson, flustered, dug into his own briefcase and threw a document on the desk. This is what matters. This is the statutory warranty deed, signed by the executor of my father's estate, granting me the house. It's fee simple. It supersedes that trust nonsense. Harper finally spoke. Her voice was cold and clear, aimed only at the monitor. That deed is void, she stated. It was executed by a grantor, the estate, which has had zero legal claim to this parcel for over 5 years. It is a fraudulent conveyance based on a broken chain of title. The property was never part of the probate estate. David Chen's face went rigid. I looked back at Grayson. The silence in the room was a vice. I want to be absolutely clear. Grayson, for the record, for Mr. Chen, and for his underwriters. Are you stating that you are the fee simple owner of this parcel? He looked at Sloane. He looked at Kellen. He was cornered. To back down now was to lose the Bridgewell deal. To double down was a different risk. He chose arrogance. Yes, he snapped, his voice rising. I am the fee simple owner. This house is mine. Thank you, I said. In the corner, Morel Soto hit send. She had not just been recording, she had been compiling. She emailed the video clip of Grayson's assertion, the audio file, the fraudulent warranty deed he had just produced, and the correct, recorded deed chain. She sent it all, in real time, directly to the compliance division at Bridgewell Equity and to the head of underwriting at their designated title company, on the screen. David Chen looked down at a notification on his own device. He read it. His face, which had been neutral, became a mask of cold fury. He did not look at us again. He simply moved his mouse. The video feed snapped to black. He was gone. What? Sloane said, staring at the blank monitor. Where did he go, David? Kellen's phone buzzed, a harsh, violent sound on the desk. He picked it up. His face went grey. He read the email aloud, his voice hollow. All the salesmanship gone. From Bridgewell Title. We are in receipt of conflicting documentation regarding ownership of the target parcel. All escrow is frozen. This file is cancelled, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into material misrepresentation of title by the seller. Grayson's final move was one of pure desperation. He had filed an emergency motion in the county probate division, alleging I was incompetent, a danger to myself, and being held captive by a predatory legal team. He was petitioning the court to appoint him as my emergency guardian, to nullify the trust, and to compel my immediate relocation. The courtroom was small and suffocating, smelling of old varnish and anxiety. Grayson and Sloane sat at one table, their new, cheaper lawyer shuffling papers. I sat at the other with Harper and Morell. Grayson's lawyer went first, painting a pathetic picture of a grieving, confused widow being manipulated. He argued the Ladybird deed was a product of undue influence, that I was isolated, and that my son was only trying to protect me. Then Harper stood. She did not raise her voice. She simply began to build a cage of facts. "Your Honor," she said, her voice filling the quiet room. "This is not a wellness check. It is the final, failed step in a conspiracy to commit fraud." She placed the certified, recorded Ladybird deed on the judge's bench. She placed the Bridgewell equity term sheet next to it. She placed the signed care covenant with Grayson's digital signature on top of that. And finally, she produced Morell's forensic memo detailing the $1.8 million in concealed transfers. The judge, a sharp woman who had clearly seen every flavor of family greed, held up her hand. "I want to see the live recorder feed for this parcel. Mr. Clark, please pull the history." A moment later, the official county website was projected onto the wall screen. The judge read the lines aloud. "Owner of record, Blue Heron Trust, Trustee Eleanor K. Whitfield. Reserved interest, enhanced life estate, Eleanor K. Whitfield." She looked at Grayson's lawyer. "This seems exceptionally clear. What am I missing?" Harper stepped forward. "You are missing only one thing, Your Honor. Clause 14B of the trust, the escalation rider." She read it into the record. The cold, legal language was devastating. It stated that any attempt by the beneficiary to involuntarily displace the life tenant, combined with any affiliated sale within 180 days of Victor's death, would trigger an automatic reversion. It would claw back the proceeds of that affiliated sale, in their entirety, to the trust. Grayson Whitfield closed on the $30 million sale of the affiliated storage facilities just 5 days ago, Harper concluded. His signature on the Bridgewell covenant, which we have provided, constitutes the legal attempt to displace his mother. He has triggered the clawback. The trust is now the rightful owner of that $30 million. A man I hadn't noticed, sitting in the back row, stood up. "Your Honor, I represent Bridgewell Equity. Given the compliance issues and material misrepresentations exposed here today, we are immediately withdrawing from any and all proposed relationships with Mr. Whitfield." Grayson just stared, his mouth slightly open. The new lawyer was looking through his papers, completely lost. Sloane was pale, her fingers clutching her phone. The judge struck the gavel. The sound was like a snapping bone. "Mr. Whitfield's motion is denied with prejudice. The life estate of Eleanor Whitfield is validated and inviolable." This court further authorizes the Blue Heron Trust to seek immediate restitution by liening the beneficiaries' accounts, pending a full and final accounting. It was done. As the room began to clear, Grayson, ashen and hollowed out, turned to me. He whispered it across the empty space between the tables. "Mum, Mum, please." I looked at my son. The plea wasn't for forgiveness. It wasn't for mercy. It was for his money. He had lost his inheritance, his house, and his C-suite job in the span of 10 minutes. I could have taken it all. I could have ruined him, left him with nothing but the echo of his own greed. I saw Harper watching me, her expression neutral, waiting for my command. I would not let this break me, and I would not let it define him. I instructed Harper to settle. The terms were not negotiable. Grayson would receive a modest stipend, enough to live, but not to scheme. The balance of the $30 million would remain in the trust, under my sole control. He would only receive that stipend upon the verified completion of 1,000 hours of pro bono logistics work for a non-profit that recovered assets for victims of fraud. Finally, he and Sloan would sign a lifetime no-contest agreement. He took the deal. That night, I walked onto the dock. The air was cold, and the lake was a sheet of dark glass. I held Victor's heavy silver pen in my hand. I thought of his confession, his fear, and the complex, flawed, and powerful weapon he had left me. I held the pen out over the black water, thinking I might drop it, let the past sink into the silt. But I didn't. I clicked the cap shut, a sharp, definite sound in the twilight. I put the pen in my pocket. I was, after all, the trustee, and I had a new chapter to write. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from, so please share your thoughts and where you are in the comments below. We can connect and share our own stories. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like, and if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.